for tonight's guest, and as Chief of the US Pacific Command, Admiral Timothy Keating is at the pointy end of the US military superpower. In 32 years, the former Navy pilot rose to the highest ranks in the service. He's commanded the US Naval Forces Central Command and the US Fifth Fleet, and for 3 years, from 2004, he was commander of the North American Aerospace Defence Command, also known as NORAD. Well, the remarkable thing about the NORAD Command Centre is it is buried in a nuclear bomb-proof bunker 600 metres inside Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. NORAD was central to the policy of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, under which a Soviet nuclear attack on the United States would trigger an overwhelming nuclear retaliation, and with it the annihilation of both superpowers and very likely the rest of the world. Admiral Keating is in Australia for talks with the Chief of the Australian Defence Forces, Angus Hewson, on the two countries' mutual military interests in the region. He joined us in the studio earlier this evening. Admiral Keating, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tony.
Yours is the largest US naval command in the world. Can you start by giving us a sense of the size and the scope of it?
Sure. 51% of the surface of the Earth, from the west coast of the United States and South America to essentially the east coast of Africa, including India, China, Mongolia, and the eastern half of Russia, North Pole to the South Pole. So 51% of the surface of the Earth, half the world's population. It is the largest combatant command, not just naval command, but combatant command in the world, particularly for the United States of America.
To use your own words, the United States is the big dog on the block in this region, in this massive region that you've just described. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's not a point we would emphasize. We'd like folks to understand that because of the strategy that we're employing, Tony. We don't want to come in and dominate or pound our chest. Rather, we want to work in a very cooperative, collaborative fashion with all of our friends, partners, and allies in the region, including, foremost on that list, Australia.
But you are the preeminent military power. You've said so yourself, and you've said that you will remain so. The United States will remain so for the near, mid, and long term, and that this is an issue which others will have to concern themselves with. I presume the others are those who might compete for power in the region.
We'd hope that everyone would take that into consideration. What you said, we have significant capabilities and capacity, and we would like folks to consider that as they develop their own strategies.
And yet when you met your Chinese counterpart, a story you've also told in the past, that, I guess, Admiral, said to you that he hoped there'd be a day when you stayed on your own side of the Pacific. Presumably what he meant is the Chinese will control one side of the Pacific and you'll be able to stay on your side of the Pacific.
Yeah, none of us will agree to that, of course. He was very much tongue-in-cheek. It was said in a very offhand manner, and we have no intention of forfeiting any, nor do any of us have any intention of forfeiting free and ready access to the maritime domain or other domains.
You don't really expect that Chinese military commanders are going to be joking about something like that, though behind what he's saying there's something serious, isn't there?
I think China has a desire to, in their words, Tony, protect those things that are theirs, which is fair enough. And that means unfettered access to the maritime domain for supply of natural resources, for supply of fuel oils, for supply, for the transport of export and import goods. So their desire to have access to the maritime domain and the air domain is understandable, and we would support that.
It seems to me that small confrontation is somewhat symbolic, though, that what's at stake here is your... And I think this would have to be a US military objective now, which would be to contain Chinese military power in the world.
We'd rather not use the term contain, Tony. I'd rather say welcome them to participate as a free and willing partner in military exercises, in personnel exchanges, in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief exercises, so that they can come on out and join with all the rest of us in the Asia-Pacific region. There's lots of room for us, and we can go a long way to ensure peace and stability in the region by having them come into the coalition as willing partners.
That's a diplomatic way of putting it, of course, and the truth is that China's undergoing a rapid modernisation of its military forces, in particular its navy. It's trying to build a blue water navy. It's building aircraft carriers. It already has missile-carrying warships and will build more and more advanced ones, and it has a submarine fleet which is growing all the time. I mean, what do you suppose the Chinese military position, particularly the naval position, will look like in the next 10 or 20 years?
Yeah. You raise a great point, and we emphasize this in the somewhat limited conversation we have with our Chinese military colleagues. We want to understand much better their intention. We can see the development that they're undergoing. We can see some of the improvements that they're making in their military forces. But in our dialogue with our Chinese counterparts, we emphasize to them our desire to understand intention. Some folks like the word transparency. We don't think that's sufficient to cause. We want to understand not just what it is they're doing, because we can see a lot of that, and you just ran through a pretty good list. We want to understand what it is they have in mind for the near, mid, and long term. That's our goal, to understand better their intentions.
One strategic assessment of what they have in mind is building the capacity to prevent any US military intervention if it comes to an invasion of Taiwan. In other words, to interdict or prevent US naval or other forces reaching the Taiwanese if it came to that. Is that a strategic assessment you would go along with?
As you know, our Taiwan policy is long-standing. It's been on the books for many, many years, since the late 70s. China certainly understands our policy toward Taiwan. We are increasingly hopeful that China understands that there is a potential for some peaceful resolution to the cross-strait issue. And so the likelihood of a situation developing where military power is applied, we hope, is very remote.
But what about the Chinese strategic position? I mean, do you assess what they're doing as being related to an attempt to put beyond doubt Chinese hegemony over Taiwan? Military domination.
Our Chinese colleagues emphasize to us repeatedly their desire for a reunification of Taiwan. Our position is we would like some peaceful resolution of the situation. How China and Taiwan resolve that, up to them. Taiwan, of course, has a freely elected government, and we would allow both of those countries to work towards some sort of eventual solution. And we are vitally interested in maintaining peace and stability across the strait, and that is our long-term goal as well.
Is China considered a potential military threat?
I would call them a country whose military development is worth watching very carefully. I would not call them a threat.
And yet, I think you've answered him before, they could be if we ignore them.
Oh, we ignore them at our own peril, and they ignore us at their own peril. That gets to the very heart of the issue. We want to ask them, we have repeatedly asked them to come on out, if you will, and to join with us in very small-scale, limited incremental steps so as to understand our position, that there is plenty, and once again, there's plenty of room for all of us in the Asia-Pacific. We don't want to end up in a confrontational situation with them, and we're very confident they don't want to end up in the same situation with us.
Is it more difficult to deal with China or to predict their actions when what you're dealing with is a one-party state, where the normal checks and balances on military power that you would find in a Western democracy simply don't exist? So, in fact, you don't know how powerful the military are behind the scenes.
I wouldn't put it that way. As to the one-party system in China, that's obviously a subject of a lot different conversation. When I meet with Chinese military leaders, it's a conversation very similar to that you and I are having now. We're long-term professionals. They understand what we represent. We understand what they express as their strategy. We'd like to have a better grasp of their intentions. But the political system in which they operate is not a topic of much discussion with us.
So it's not even a hint of their intentions, as far as you see it, when one of them, a very senior military officer, says to you, "We'd rather see you on that side of the Pacific, not this side"?
I'm convinced it was a very tongue-in-cheek comment, Tony.
Do you think Japan's military capability needs to be enhanced, especially their naval forces, to counter any potential threat or imbalance of power in the region as China develops its military capacity?
Yeah, I'd leave that up to the Chinese government, and a new one likely to be in power.
The Japanese government.
I'm sorry, Japanese government. Thank you.